and record this call so that people playing along at home and not being able to join us can join us. So I sent out some thoughts and looking for some input and feedback. You don't have to give it all on this call. I will put together a poll per working group call just to explain what you think would be helpful. So in working through this goal and working through the initiatives, there's a lot of things that come up. One of the things that I heard was this, like goal 1.1 about diverse NRP leadership. If we don't get that, then the rest of the goals, the rest of the initiatives cannot kind of follow through. Like, we've got to nail this one. The reality is, by the fall, when we're having the RFP process, we're not going to be able to solve for that. That's just a fact. We will not be able to solve the idea of trying to get diverse leadership on NRP boards and management by the fall. So keeping in the idea of the equation being initiative plus ecosystem building practitioners plus national resource providers equals pilot project. Just like in any math equation, when we have less of this, we're just going to need to balance it with some of this. So perhaps at least part of that is getting more diversely represented ecosystem building practitioners, which can influence and be part of and be that board of customers for that initiative. That's a solution for now. It's not the solution, but it's a thought. And so that's what we're going to work on going forward. Right now, there's tension point, and it started to talk about ecosystem building practitioners and national resource providers. Like what I learned, the term is called it's called inter-alliance rivalry. So what inter-alliance rivalry is, it's me against you, us against them, all of us against all of them. And it's basically tribalism. And so who you identify with and what you feel your group is, and then it's all of us, like feisty ecosystem builders against economic development, those people, or government, or whatever. So there's a natural tension. This is community building at the core. This is the messy part. It's complex, and it's something that we actually really have to work through, because what a lot of people think when they're Hi, Malika. What a lot of people think when they do community building is, well, we can avoid it or dodge the challenges or the problems. And the reality is that the problems don't go away. People go away. So that's not actually community building by not addressing the problem and the obstacle. So I'm actually working on a blog post about how complex community ecosystem building and mass collaboration is, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. So first, and now that Malika's joined us, I'm going to officially kick off the call. I would love for all of you to share, and let me preface that by saying I finally saw the Avengers movie. Just yesterday. So with superheroes on their mind, I'm going to ask you to share what your superpower is and how you want to contribute that to this goal, this work, your work, whatever it is. And so that's the ask. So what is your superpower, and how are you going to use that superpower for the greater good? And since Beth saw the movie yesterday too, I'm going to pick on Beth first.
Okay, hi everyone. My superpower and curse is I have really deep intuition, and how I'm using that to help in this field is really putting an emphasis on empathy and listening, and helping to provide different perspectives when challenges or barriers arise, and really talk through about the behaviors of others and what perspective that might be coming from, to kind of help avoid the victim mentality and help us realize that we need to focus on the things we can control, and the things we can't control, we just have to let them do what they do. How's that? I'll popcorn to Malika.
Hello, everybody. I have not seen the Avengers movie, but Cecilia told me to send out some questions to my friends about what they think my superpower is, and I just got one back. And one of the things that they said that you are good at getting people, they want to follow you, even if you don't know where you're going, people want to follow you. So in terms of that, it feels like a great responsibility, because I think that has some truth to it. Like, people are like, what do you want to do? So we're ready. And so kind of honing how do I use that superpower for good and for this community is helping to bring more people into the ecosystem, so instead of like having that divide, like expanding, doing that inclusive community building. So I'm going to popcorn over to Eric.
Why, hello. Yeah, hello, everyone. Let's see. So I think that I rarely would describe it as a superpower, but I think there's sort of a persistence, which sometimes can be sort of a nagging kind of thing. But basically, in a lot of this work, it's so long-term that, just, having a thought in mind or having a standard that we want to achieve, and just kind of continually sometimes doing big things and sometimes doing small things to agitate and work toward that goal. I think that's, I don't know, it seems like it pays off, and I'm incapable of not doing it. So I will claim it as something I like. Jenny, I will popcorn to you.
This question is really hard. I wish I had time to email people and ask them what they thought my superpower was before this question. I think maybe my superpower is that I follow through when I say I'm going to do something. It's something that is really important to me, and that can be really annoying as well as a superpower. Like, if I say I'm going to do it, I'll do it, and then it's like I'm doing too many things. But I think there is something to be said for like really just saying that's what I'm going to do, and really pushing to make that happen no matter what. And how I'm bringing that to this community is, I've really dedicated my past 5 years plus to promoting entrepreneurship for people with disabilities. So really just bringing them into all types of conversations. Like, this whole ESHIP community has been really something that wasn't necessarily on my radar, but just this responsibility to make entrepreneurship an option for the population has just led me all these different directions. So yeah.
Great, thank you, everybody. So, so the next part of, what? Did I miss somebody, Beth?
Did you share yours?
My superpower? Oh, no, thank you for calling me out. So my superpower, I drilled down to what my purpose is, in talking about what the world needs, what I'm good at, what I get paid for, and what I'm passionate about. So that whole ikigai I showed Malika. I'll share a graphic with all of you in an email. But I get really excited to connect people So connecting people is something that I'm good at. I have to not be humble in saying, yes, I'm good at making introductions, and to engage. So trying to get all of you to talk, even when it's super awkward. So thank you for being comfortable in the discomfort and creating a sense of belonging. So it's kind of all rolled up into connect, engage, and belong. So I realized that those are the things that I want to bring to a community. And now I've aligned the things that I do, used to be the stuff I do for free, right? And now I get compensated to do that. So that's super cool. And now I just want to keep going in that form. With that in mind, knowing that come July, there's going to be a bunch of people who are very excited. Some of them may have never been on a call. Some of them kind of know the work, maybe attended ESHIP, maybe didn't, but they would like to be involved. My hope is that they don't feel like the new kid in class when they come in, and all of you all have seen each other's faces, know each other, have interacted in different ways. That super awkward feeling of coming late to the party and not knowing how to plug in. So in support of that, we will be creating some kind of directory where you can put a picture of yourself, a description, the goals, the initiatives that you're all interested in, so that somebody can look at that page, probably live somewhere on our dashboard, so that they know who people are in the community, and offer the option of how to get in touch with you in some way. Maybe it's something nondescript like a Twitter handle or LinkedIn or something that's not like you have my phone number and out there and all of those things. So it's more of an opt-in thing. So that will do. And then these phone calls. So we've talked about themes, we've talked about definitions, we've talked about projects kind of generally. Think about, what does this call need to be for you, and how can we support the community in working on these initiatives? Do we need it to be around initiatives? Do you want to problem solve, brainstorm? Is it a good touch point so we know what everybody's doing so that we don't duplicate and overlap? I think what we're thinking about, and you let us know, poke the holes in the theories. Please don't not say anything, because the last thing we want to do is put together some things and you go, oh yeah, I thought that was a really crappy idea. And you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't you say anything, right? Oh, well, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. So no, don't do that. We're going to take those initiative canvases that were worked on at the summit and outside of the summit, and we're going to start loading them up into the dashboard under each of those initiatives. Now you get to see, so we don't duplicate efforts, right? That's the working in a silo thing, that you see what everybody else is doing. We want it to be something that people can comment on, and this is just an idea. We really are still brainstorming around this. But then the project team that's working on the initiative could kind of just take all the inputs and then decide what they want to do, right? So it's just an idea, and like I said, we're just thinking through the process, and we'll be getting together this week. Some of us are still recovering, sleep deprived from the summit, so not me, but anyway. So does this working group call become, I want to talk about inclusion, right? Because that's what this call is about. I'm having a problem in my community. I just need other people who get it, think about it, geek out on the same things, and we get to be kind of ombudsmen to each other. Does this call become where, I don't know. So there's a lot of different directions, and you don't have to solve for that right now. So, but I'd like to open up a discussion about that. And then at the end of the month, I will put together a poll where you can chime in, and it will be a different poll for each call because we have different personalities on each call. And then we'll make the responses open and shareable to all of you so that you know what's gone on. So any questions, thoughts come to mind first?
Well, I was thinking about,
Yep.
the ESHIP goals and initiatives are to build the field. So if we're going to open the calls up to talk about what's happening in our communities without the ultimate goal of supporting the emergence of the field, I don't know if that takes us too far away from our original mission.
Okay, that's very fair. Malika, you're like way too polite and raising your hand. Just you're fine. Go ahead and speak.
I like all of the things you said. I'm interested in the piece of hearing from other communities about what they're doing and maybe what problems they're having. So, some kind of portion of the agenda, which is like, hey, this is what we're doing. Yeah, and our problem. What do you guys think? Or just a highlight of things that are working well. That might be a good thing. And then an update on how to proceed on the initiatives and the projects. What do we need to do, or how can we help, or an update on how things are going.
Okay, those are both very good. Eric, Jenny?
I'll agree. So some of the stuff I was thinking about is kind of what Malika's already talked about. So I think in a way there's sort of like three different things. One that I is similar to what Malika was talking about is like I call it like a touch point, but basically there's the idea that there is something of an update about what's happening in the broader field, or specifically around initiatives that are happening. But I do like the idea that there's a doorway to general discussion about what's going on with this topic, what challenges do we have, because I think that ends up being useful to ecosystem builders around the country. The fact that it is around a topic, I think, is useful. So I think that's good, and I think it does help, to Beth's point, it does help build the overall field because we're building those connections. I'm meeting somebody who's had a similar problem in some other city, and I can help, or I can use what they've learned in order to help what I'm doing here. I think there needs to be some, project management specific kind of stuff. I know some folks kind of, the gears grind if we're not like, what's my deliverable? There's too many new voices in here and it gets too confusing. So I do think there needs to be some room for that where it's really pretty project management specific and it's just a well executed kind of thing for folks who have committed to something. Like Jenny was saying earlier, that they've committed to making something happen, and we're gonna have those kinds of dates and just kind of get into project management rhythm. But the other thing that I think, and it reminds me of kind of what we do a little bit here, but I've seen it happen in Austin and other cities, is kind of an ecosystem or an ESHIP goals calls 101, where maybe quarterly or something, there's a space for folks who are new to the calls to come in and even talk with someone like we do at a 1 Million Cups. They want to know how to plug in. They're interested in this thing or that thing. But sometimes just a 2-minute kind of conversation with a group can help really, really put them in the right place versus, oh, you're probably thinking about goal 6, show up on a call and good luck to you. So those are the three things that I think in terms of different kinds of venues and different kinds of discussions might be helpful.
Excellent. Jenny?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of some of what Eric said, I feel like they're probably, and this is such the my number one strength and strength finder is responsibility. So it's like such a thing that I will continuously think well, how are we doing that? What's going on with that? So I do think that there should be some sort of plan for delivering on these awesome kind of goals that we had set forth, and those, awesome ideas that came from the summit, kind of what are the next steps to making those happen, and maybe using these calls as a touch base. I also, and this is more of a question, I know that there's like some national resource providers who are committed to these goals. And I feel like there might be a little bit of a disconnect between like these calls and like what are they doing with regard to those goals that we're here talking about. And I don't know how to like kind of bridge that a little bit just to have a better like open conversation with everyone. And I know you were talking about that a little bit at the beginning of the call, but just more getting everyone on the same page. And I do think like an orientation kind of before you hop on a call would probably be helpful. Kind of like, here's what everyone's working on and here's what this goal is specifically about, whether it's like a document or like a pre-recorded like 2-minute thing someone watches. I think you could also say like a requirement before the call is to like email someone that's part of the group to like ask them for any advice or something to like, so that they're not showing up and it's all strangers, that they've actually had some sort of contact with someone that's part of the goal could be interesting. Just to, I don't know, get people engaged. Cause I just showed up for a call with like no warning, like 3 months ago. So I definitely felt like not sure what it was going to be like. And I was like, I'm talking a lot on this call. Like, who knew? Like, that was kind of my first reaction. So like from someone that's recently joined, that would be my perspective on that part of it.
So how did it feel to you, Jenny, being new to the call?
Yeah.
To totally put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, I'm an introvert by nature. So like getting on a call with a bunch of strangers and like sharing something about myself was like the first thing. And I was like, oh my God, we're doing it. But I felt like everyone was so kind and everything. So it wasn't like it was just more of like a nerve-wracking. I wasn't sure what to expect. So I remember hanging up and being like, wow, I talked a lot on that call. I was not expecting to contribute that much, which is great. I just think maybe having a little bit more like heads up, this is like an interactive call. Everyone's involved in this, not just like you're sitting and listening to other people have a discussion. Maybe it would have been a nice thing, but it's all good. I mean,
yeah. No, that's great. That's totally helpful. I think that's what we try to model, right? And maybe because Christine and I are very much about having all of you input. It's not our call. It's our call, right? All of us. So, and I have absolutely no qualms about obviously putting you on the spot. So there you go. It's maybe that's my superpower, right? I'll call you out. So in that case, so talking about the national resource providers, and sometimes we have people on the call who are national resource providers. And sometimes they're wearing that hat. Sometimes they're wearing their ecosystem builder hat. Sometimes they're just, and I don't want to say just, I'm trying to take that word out. It's a really interesting thing. I realize that people say it all the time. Like, I just do this. No, just take that word out, because you do this. I'm just a student. I'm just here. No, you're part of the community and you do contribute. So yes, let's maybe remind each other that we're not just anything. But when they're here, are they people that are working on an initiative? When they're and maybe it's harder because we don't always identify some of the things that we do. Like if I didn't say Eric works for the city, how many of us would have known that Eric worked for the city? Because he doesn't use his city email address, right? He's so all of those things. Like, how important is it to all of you to know, because this has come up on other calls too, how important is it for you to know what other people do, like professionally, and what other people are working on around ecosystem building? Like, how much do you need to feel connected? Or do you just feel connected to people because we're all on this call together? So I'm just putting that out there.
Interesting question. I think, there's sometimes where I want to know what hat people are wearing, and that's probably why I use my my private email address, because I'm not sure which hat I'm going to bring to things. Sometimes it's definitely a city hat. Sometimes it's more of a community builder hat, and frankly, that's at least as much my own kind of thing off to the side as it is something that's officially with the city. So, but what I like to try and do, especially if I might feeling like I'm conflicted, is to define, I'm coming here as X, because that really, I think sometimes that viewpoint really matters, especially when we start talking about projects and, if there's a budget, those kinds of things. So I don't know.
I am very curious about people. I've spent 20 plus years in the recruiting field, so it's because I'm naturally curious. I always want to know what other people do and what their backgrounds are, and in that, always find connection and ability to identify what I can talk to them offline about and how I can help them with their challenges. So the more we can do of that, the better in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. The more we can learn about each other, I think the more effective we can be in working together toward these goals that we have. But I also do think that just being on these calls and like seeing people here has given me a sense of like trust. Like there's a certain level of connection that's already here because we're just a handful of people who showed up for a Zoom call in the middle of a day to like talk about inclusion and entrepreneurship. Like you guys are my like comrades in that. So like there is that certain level of trust, but I do agree learning about each other more will probably make it more productive to know like where everyone's coming from and what their perspective brings to the table, I think.
Okay, Malika, no? All right. So Christine hosts things called baller dinners. And a baller dinner is where people get together and ask each other questions and talk about what you need, asking people what they need, and basically leaving your ego at the door and doing epic shit. So that's what baller dinners are about. And the interesting thing that they say at baller dinners is you talk about who you are, not what you do, right? So that's an interesting thing to me is when you introduce yourself. I think the historical context, especially because we all go to networking events and stuff, is, hi, I'm Cecilia. I'm the ESHIP community activator with the Kauffman Foundation, and that's a title, that's a role. It almost it doesn't really explain what I do because nobody knows what the heck ESHIP is and what community activating is and all of those things. And so we do walk around with this like nameplate, right? This is what I am, but that's not what you are. That's only part of what you are. And especially in the lens of inclusivity, it's all those facets of you. So I'm curious to know what's more, what comes to be top of mind of how you introduce yourself, and are you comfortable with that? Do you think that's not enough? Do you want to change the paradigm? Do you want to say, so I'm Cecilia, and my passion is to connect, engage, and create a sense of belonging around people. Right. So this, and sometimes I go to networking events and I ask, so tell me about yourself. And when they start telling me about their job, I stop them and say, don't tell me what you do. Tell me why you do it. Tell me who you are. Tell me what you're passionate about, because I want to know about you. I want to know about this thing that maybe brings you a paycheck. But if that's what you geek out on, then that's fine too. So now I'm going to put Malika on the spot, and I'm going to ask, what's your comfort level, and how do you adjust these things?
I think it's a good question. I've been doing some thoughts as I try to figure out what the next steps are for Eastside Collaborative. But one of the things I keep thinking about is this idea of toxic networking, which is kind of the way that we have typically been taught to do networking can be it can create boundaries for other people to come into the space, right? Because if we, one, are focused on titles like that, if you don't have a title, then, like even when I go and I'm like, I'm the founder of Eastside Collaborative, doesn't really mean anything. But also it keeps us focused on who's the most important person in the room versus being able to see the value in the person that you're talking to right then. Um, so I like the idea of it. What was your question? What was the question? It just aligned with like some other things that I've been thinking.
No. I think that's absolutely perfect. The course of that. It's not. It's just putting some thoughts out there and framing. So,
Yeah. You, I think when I hear you say that too, the first thing I thought is also we have to be careful because then that also, even with like, I'm, starting with the statement of I'm passionate about these things, there's still this language there that in which I need to wrap my passion in language that still feels like it gives me some kind of relevance to the rest of the community. So I'm like, okay, what words can I use? What am I passionate about that, will resonate with people that make them want to know me? So I don't have this is where I always am. I'm always in my mind thinking through these things and how they affect other people. So I don't have a strict statement to say about that yet. I probably need to think about it some more.
No. I think that's and I value and appreciate that because it is really. Welcome to the messy complexity, right? So.
Yes, I like that better. I just also it can just replace the title with some other no some other way of describing myself, but I still feel like I need to use the right language to describe it so that other people feel comfortable or I fit in or it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's also still conforming to to other people's boxes or conforming or assimilating to a culture, right?
It can be unless we are intentional about helping people break out of that.
And that's why especially in the DEI stuff that I work towards, it's about that sense of belonging. There's a really great book that I'm still in the middle of reading because I don't seem to read as often as I should. But Kenji Yoshino, who's a law professor at NYU, wrote a book years ago called Covering, and it's about what people do to assimilate in a situation or culture, and we do a lot of that. So I had an interesting talk with somebody in a corporation that talks about getting people acclimated to the culture or introduced to the culture of an organization. So basically, you take somebody and you bring them here, and then they find out how they're supposed to interact here so that they fit in, right? So you understand that this is, and there's so much focus on that culture aspect. Like, you should understand the culture, and I wish that there would be some balance of how can we all help create the culture or the norm. And that's where, Christine and I talk about that modeling behavior to create what's possible is to put it out there. So when you said toxic networking, I was thinking about those people that when you go to networking parts and they deal out business cards like blackjack, right? And then you come home and it's like the person with the biggest stack wins.
Yep. Or look past you when you're talking to them, like, all right, well, nice meeting you. I need to jet over to this person. You're like, okay, well, nice meeting you too. So those type of behaviors, are not inclusive, right? Of course. So the person standing there is like, okay, well, I don't belong because I'm obviously not important enough to, so I'm always thinking about those type of things. What can we do to create spaces where we model that type of behavior is not getting us to the type of community that we want to build.
And I'm not going to continue calling on people unless I need to, but I will call on you. So
I'm interested in other people's thoughts on that. I like where you were starting with, like talk about yourself. But I know I feel like, okay, so I just heard you introduce yourself, and I'm like, okay, well, am I a connector? Am I engaging? I'm like trying to like go through my vocabulary of words that seem like they fit within the thing. And I probably should not even be starting there, but that's immediately where I started. Like, how can I fit within this realm of we're ecosystem builders? So that's what I need to be thinking. I should be thinking like I'm a violin player who loves my kid, like whatever these other things are, and connection is part of that, but just one piece of it.
You really play the violin? That's awesome. So, I think, Celia, when you first asked the question, I was uncomfortable because right or wrong, my work defines me. So I would probably cheat by, and maybe it's not cheating, maybe this is where you're headed, and I think Malika kind of was going there, is describing what attributes we have that help us to be successful in the roles that we play in work. And that is like the servant leadership and the being a connector and being sincerely interested and in helping people get what they need to be successful. I could describe myself like that. Again, that aligns with what I do for my work, which defines me, which I don't know that that's right or wrong, but that's what I'm thinking at this point.
Yeah, I'll say I don't have a good answer to this, but I think it's a good question. And I could kind of go back to, well, let's see, or the way that I kind of look at this, it depends a little bit on environment or the group, and we're sort of, in some ways, we're helping define and create what the culture of ecosystem builders are, or at least within the ESHIP context. So, well, when I look at this, it's sort of who are the folks who are not, that we want to do a better job of including and that we want to invite and bring in here, and how do we make them most welcome and comfortable? So asking someone right off the bat, what their job is might be the most comfortable way for them to get in. It's sort of like it's an expected question. It's relatively easy. But again, it may exclude some people may feel excluded by that. So I don't quite know what the right question is. Something about drive, I think, works in this, and I think that unites the people who are in the ecosystem building world, because sometimes we're driven by something like our job. It's pretty closely entwined with who I am and what I do. And there are a lot of people I think in the room who are just they're about maybe they made some money or something else, and they have some privilege and they want to do something with that. They want to give back to community, et cetera. So I think that's a useful one, but really I think it comes back to who's most uncomfortable that we want to make feel welcome and to have that sense of belonging.
For me, it's a hard question to answer because my work is so intertwined with my personal life. The whole reason I started the organization was because of my brother. So I feel like for me, there really is no, my work really, kind of what Beth was saying, my work really does define who I am. And a huge part of that is because it was based on my family, and my brother has autism. So I started an organization to teach entrepreneurship because he's an entrepreneur. It's all very intertwined. So I have a hard time with that. I think I just kind of, at this point, I just kind of start with my personal story because it leads to what I do. So that's a little bit different, I think, than probably most people's experiences. Because if you look at anything that we do, first thing is our founder story. It's all about me and Brent, and that's kind of just built into what I do every day. So it's interesting because I actually don't personally feel like I have a hard time if someone's like, well, what are you passionate about? It's all so intertwined to me because it is such a personal thing. But I do think that's not the case for a lot of people. And so how do we make people who, feel more comfortable? And I think interesting that I do feel like a lot of people feel comfortable just saying, oh, this is what I do first before kind of getting into that more personal stuff. Because I don't think a lot of people are as comfortable right off the bat being like, this is my whole life story, or here's what I'm really passionate about, that maybe doesn't fit into your traditional, this is what you should be passionate about in this networking event kind of thing, like Malika was saying. But I also think, like, when you said that, Eric, I was thinking about our students, and most of them, 85% of the people we work with, or 85% of people with developmental disabilities don't have a job. So if they were to show up at a group setting and someone's like, what do you do? I just feel like that would be really hard. But there's really, I don't know if there's a one size fit all answer, because there's going to be some people who aren't uncomfortable sharing what they're passionate about, and some people who are more comfortable like leaning on their job. And, I don't know, I think it's a very complex question.
Somebody mentioned at the summit, and I can't for the life of me remember her name, but she's somewhat new to Forward Cities team. And she said, I like to ask when I meet somebody, what do you most want me to know about you? I thought that was really insightful. And I'm going to try to remember to do that going forward, but thought it was good to share that.
I like that a lot. I do. I think that's and depending on how comfortable they feel, though, in the environment, you're going to get very different answers, right? I want you to most know something. Is it vulnerable, right? And that's what we have to balance. So all of that saying trust and vulnerability is an integral part of it, and yeah, it's really interesting. So I love the idea of talking about the language that's involved and being mindful. Going back to major identity markers, I will share an experience that I had recently. And Eric was actually the topic of my discussion. But not super awkward, somewhat awkward conversation. Was I was hanging out with a friend of mine who's very passionate about inclusion, and a person came over, kind of walked into our conversation, talked about what they were doing and how they wanted to include and put a lot of focus on inclusivity. And I mentioned Eric, because Eric is one of the people that I know is very mindful about creating the space and the grace for people to come and be in a circle. It doesn't have to be at his table, but convening in a very mindful way, and really intentional about representation and balance and all of those things. So I did say, my friend Eric is very mindful, and I appreciate that as a cis white hetero male. And I rattled those things off, and the person said, and what does that matter? Where my friend jumped up almost like off his bar stool and said, this just tells me that you are not ready for this conversation. And I was like, oh, trying to talk somebody down. And he had the best intentions at heart, and I really appreciate him doing that, because I was not in a position to address. I kind of, foundation hat or whatever on, and not good for me to get involved in this conversation. So I'm bringing that up to say I think it's also interesting when we try to be mindful and help others, that you're able to advocate for. And in this work, especially in being inclusive, it's a lot about listening, and it's a lot about advocating, and how we show up, and when to step in and when not to step in is also really important. So it's messy as hell, And so I appreciate people like Eric. I also appreciate people like my friend who was able to call out the behavior. So I'm just going to put it out there as there's not a lesson learned or anything. It's just an experience. And I'd love to get your input and thoughts on that. And I want to say that I was in sales, and I also know to let the space, the uncomfortable quiet go on. So we have 10 minutes. I'm all good with that.
I'm terrible with the silence. So I'll say something, but I don't know. I'm not totally sure what happened. Was it? So I'm a little unclear about, one person was saying something, and you were making a suggestion, and another person was saying that was a bad suggestion, or I'm kind of missing the different the dynamics among the three people that are involved in that. So I'm not, I don't know if there was a context problem or.
So I'll share a little bit more about the context and the reaction that I had. So in talking about and kind of the person who walked up to us was talking about how they're working to be more inclusive in their environment and the work that they do and trying to bring inclusivity, kind of infusing it into the work that they're doing. And in doing so, when I correlated that, it's having somebody like you who is very mindful. They happen to work in an organization that's in your region. I'm not calling out who it is, but that they wanted to be intentional about inclusivity. And that's when I referenced the fact that you were in this general area and that you were somebody who I think of as a good example of being mindful in the work. And just me rattling off cis white hetero male, and they voiced. So, and why is that important, or what does that matter, is what they said. So has anybody had that experience?
Yeah. So when I hear this story, I guess I feel like right now, and it's cyclical, but there definitely is a lot of focus on building inclusive communities, entrepreneurial communities, but also, doing this economic development work and, all this stuff. And what can happen is because we know that we need to be focused on it. We know that there's a certain type of language that we should be using to be considered allies and to be considered on the right side of history, but we don't always do the work and really understanding what it means. And so to me, like, the important part of naming kind of how Eric works and all of his demographic information is to say that he uses his privilege in those spaces to be able to convene those people together. And that's important because he does have that privilege, right? So for somebody to say, what does that matter, really kind of means that you not sure you understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So you're championing it, but you don't seem to understand like how all these intersections work. So that's kind of what I got from the story. Is that right? Is that kind of what you got from? Is that where you were
Yeah,
going?
well, that's how I felt,
Yes.
and then that's where my friend reacted and really reacted and said, "This
Right.
tells me you're not ready for this conversation."
Right. So you want to be in the end. I think that's important to say that, but then also give people the tools to be like, if you want to be ready, here's some stuff you can read, here's some places you can go, here's some things to like kind of get you centered on it, because we want you to come and be part of this effort. But you can't be in here, like it's just too important for you to be here and not be knowledgeable about what you're talking about, because you can do more harm than good.
So, okay, so in the interest of time, because we're going to wrap up, thank you for being my translator too, in not getting all of that out. So one of the things that I was at 1 million cups this morning, so I'm in the 1 million cups mode, and we always talk about what can the 1 million cups community do for you, and we ask you all the time, what can the ESHIP community do for you? I want to know what you need from the ESHIP community. So you're on this call, and as kind of a wrap up, let's hear what is something that us on this call, the community, myself, anybody, any parts of it, what do you need from the world? Like, what do we need so we send that energy your way? And we'll start with Beth.
Thank you. I think my community still really needs this ESHIP work to continue, and I have purposeful impatience. And I know we talk about it taking 20 years. I want it to take 5. And personally, what I need from this ESHIP community is to continue building the relationships. I'm still trying to dig my way out of victim mode mindset. And so the more support I can get from you guys that get it, the faster that'll happen. Thanks for asking. I'll popcorn to.
Wait, before that, can you explain the victim thing? So
I was going to ask that too. If you want to, Beth.
Yeah, it's the thing that happens in every community. I've been working to get the community rallied around ecosystem building for 6 or 7 years now, and it comes and it goes, but there's a lot of people don't like. I think a lot of ecosystem builders, including myself, we stepped out and took the reins to solve a problem that nobody else was willing to do. And now that we've made some progress and had some impact, people are not appreciative of if we get some kind of recognition for doing that. And the traditional folks, the claws come out and people are crazy. So, and as most of us know, as ecosystem builders, it can be really lonely if you don't have support in your community that's meaningful. So that's where that's coming from.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Beth was going to popcorn, but I didn't let her pick.
I'll go to Eric.
Yeah, and I've heard similar things, so I was writing down. I want to record that quote because so many people have said that something similar, and yeah, that's something that we could all as a community do a better job of, I think, and hope. I think particularly with this call, the thing that I would most love from the ESHIP community is I think we need to make a strong, ongoing, persistent statement that equity and inclusion is essential to building healthy ecosystems. Yeah, I mean and it's talked about. It's brought up, but I think that kind of needs to be top of mind almost all the time. That is really, really an essential element to doing this, because it's easy for cities and communities to forget that, to work on, here's a shiny thing, or, this is somebody made, a lot, quite a few $1,000,000 or something like that. That's great, but I think the ongoing, and why I sort of claim persistence and stuff, is this is the thing that's going to make, address or redress harm and create a huge, much better future for generations. So that's why I show up to this group. Anyway, I'll popcorn to Malika.
Okay. Yeah, Beth, I feel you on that. Not that I've been in this fight that long, but I do feel kind of that feeling of like, oh, now that you guys have come, now that you're showing up, which is what we wanted to, that feeling of, are you going to still be included? You laid the groundwork. You've been doing this for free or not, but are you going to be included? So my request is kind of a personal one. We don't talk that much about what we do, but I've been working on Eastside Collaborative, trying to figure out about a co-working space, and I'm going to pivot a little bit. But in the meantime, I am trying to figure out how to create some financial stability for myself. And I think I want to do some of this work, part-time or contract with organizations to do this type of work, maybe outreach, program development and management. And so if any of you have started out doing that work, or received proposals from other people who are interested in that work, like, how do you get started? How do you move into a space where you're like, okay, I want to consult or do this work? That's what I'm kind of looking for. How do I move in that direction to set myself up as a person who can help organizations here where I am do this type of work? So yeah, that's my request. It's a personal one, but I'm hoping that maybe you guys, have some experience and might be able to help.
Malika, do you have co-starters in your market?
Yeah, we do. We do have co-starters. There's a couple organizations that do it.
I would suggest maybe going through that process, because they help you vet your idea, and part of that is, going out and testing the market.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, the 9 weeks, they walk you through step by step how to start and scale. If through the vetting process, you're learning that this service is something that is definitely needed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just a thought.
I don't want to start a new business though. That's the only thing. I just kind of want to do this contractually. I don't want to start a whole new business. So just good to know, like, ooh, that made me feel anxious about going through co-starters for 9 weeks to do this. So, but thank you.
It's different because, ours is, we have people coming in through the cohorts that they just have an idea and they're thinking about providing a solution. They're not necessarily saying, I'm starting a business.
Okay.
But how to take your solution to the people that need it. Right?
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that leaves me. I actually have 2 things, if that's allowed, that I want to request. One is really from the ESHIP community. I would like to know, we've come up with these awesome initiatives and goals and all of that. What can I do? Like, what are like the next steps? Is there some place like for, you know, is there kind of like a plan, or like, do we need someone to create a plan? Like, what kind of things like can I do there to help like move forward some of these awesome, you know, goals we have underneath, you know, or initiatives we have underneath goal 1? I feel like I loved seeing all of those ideas up on those big boards. And I know you said you're going to share them and all of that, but like, is there a tangible, like, go for it type of moment? Cause I'm all about that. And then the other one, which is more of a personal / work thing for me, is I, you know, similarly to what you guys are explaining, our ecosystem is a little different. I mean, we work nationally, so technically I guess I am a national resource provider in that way, but we work specifically with people with disabilities. And our kind of community of the disability community thinks that we're absolutely crazy to be teaching entrepreneurship. And I just had a call earlier this week with a leader in the community who said, oh, what are they going to do? Like, make a couple bars of soap at home and maybe sell 1 or 2 online. And that's the rhetoric that's within the disability community, which is really hard all the time. And it's basically a consistent uphill battle for us. Sorry, I didn't mean it to get emotional, but I think being a part of the ESHIP community and being at the conference and telling people what we do was like, I felt more support there than I have in the disability community. Although we are very different than anyone else. Like, I didn't meet anyone else at the conference talking about people with disabilities. And so I think feeling more and more accepted of this group within the ESHIP community would mean a lot to like me and my work in the community, which, you know, is 1 in 5 people in the US has a disability. So it's a really big one. So we're talking about inclusion, and I know we've talked about it here before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but making it part of everyone's conversation. And I guess another offer from me is, you know, I talked to a couple different organizations while we were there, but happy to just come in and do like trainings or talk about how ecosystem builders can be more inclusive of people with disabilities. Something I would love to start helping out, because we're only one organization and we can only do so much. And I just, yeah, so that's kind of just overall what's happening.
Absolutely perfect. And thank you. Thank you for trusting us with your vulnerability. That's really important. So thank you all for being here and your energy going this way. I feel like there's something between Jenny's ask and Malika's ask that could be really kind of interesting, because I think that there are conversations that need to be had around the different ways that people show up, and perhaps that's something that that expands both of your passions and gifts in a very interesting way, right? So one of the things that I want to ask, and I think I put it out there at the summit, is I want you to advocate for each other, because it's lonely. When Beth says that, you know, she feels like she's not really heard or seen in her community, and sometimes it does take people outside of our community to come in and raise up that awareness. So that's what we tried to do in support of Beth. Hopefully some of that has some traction, to have, to Jenny's point, to have all of us talk about being mindful. So advocate for each other. Entrepreneurs are very needy. Communities are needy. And we are ecosystem builders who support the community. So you're always, when you constantly give before you get, sometimes we forget that we have to get a little too. So it's okay to ask, and I want you to be comfortable in that. So that's also what community is about. So advocate for each other, because only you know what all the rest of us are going through, right? Just little bits of it, not exactly. And what I have a personal ask or a professional ask is for you who are ESHIP champions on the call, that you would send me 2 sentences just to kind of summarize a couple of things on the call, so that when I load it up into the dashboard, pick a couple of things that seem to be important, more of a TLDR. So in case somebody just wants to have some notion, but actually I'd invite all of you on the call to do that. And that's it. So, and I've got to jump on another call. Thank you again for your time and your energy, and I appreciate you all. So have a good week. Bye.